We were taught that our parents were doing like the most valuable, important jobs in the world. And if we were to be a distraction or get in the way with that, then we would be committing like this huge crime to get in the way of Scientology. By the time I was 6, there were about 80 to 100 kids at this boarding school called the Ranch. The way they had us organized, the kids took care of ourselves. Like the kids did each other's laundry. The kids served up food to other kids. I was, for a period, like the child medical officer. I would go around every day and asking kids what their sickness was, and if they didn't feel good, I would give them an assist. The adults did the occasional oversight. They were mostly like issuing us orders of projects that we had to do. We would mix cement, we would dig trenches, we would dig holes to plant trees. We were doing landscaping, but it was heavy manual labor. Or sitting in a 160-degree sauna for 5 hours. You have to run for 30 minutes before you go in the sauna, and you have to take niacin, like flushing niacin. So you're in this hot sauna and you're having a niacin reaction where you're turning red, you're itching. I disregarded the pain. I just viewed my body as like this organism that I was inhabiting for this lifetime. Next lifetime, I would pick up another one. It's just crazy how we were trained to completely ignore how our body felt at all times and completely disregard it. I remember one time when I was at the ranch and another kid who was my friend, I remember him telling me my uncle was the leader of Scientology. Like, you know, your uncle Dave is like the boss of this whole thing. He said he's the chairman of the board. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And he was like, he's like the boss of everyone. He's the boss of the whole thing. And I was like, really?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding that healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening on those podcast platforms and you would like to watch, go on over to YouTube so you can see our faces. You can join in on the conversation. Adding those comments, words of encouragement really is the best way to support the podcast. Any way you can interact with the post, liking, sharing, all of those things really helps the algorithm. And today's video is sponsored by Rocket Money. More on that later. Today's guest, I'm so excited to be finally connected with her. We actually had something scheduled back in January, and then life for both of us just got a little crazy. And so we have pushed it off until now, but I think it's the perfect timing, and it always ends up being the perfect timing when we have our guests on. So I'm so excited to have her here today. She grew up in Scientology. Her uncle is currently running Scientology. So she has a lot to say about her life growing up in it, even getting married, leaving, and we're also going to discuss what it's like trying to navigate relationships after leaving a high control group and what that looks like. So thank you so much for joining us, Jenna Miscavige.
Of course. Yay. I'm glad we're finally doing this.
Yes, me too. I feel like your name has also come up so many times since we started the channel, and we kept meaning to reach out to you and connect to you. I know anyone who's familiar with ex-Scientology space knows who you are, knows your channel. If you're not familiar, guys, definitely go check out Jenna's channel. She has a lot going on over there that you're not going to want to miss. And you wrote this whole book here, which is awesome. I think I read through it back in January, so it's been a little bit, but I'm excited to dive into a lot of your story and hear more of the details from you.
Awesome. I'm excited too.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. You were born into Scientology, and it really does create a different experience, obviously, than someone who has joined in their adult years. Because if you're not familiar with Scientology, they basically don't believe in children, right? They just believe that they are souls that are thousands or millions or trillions of years old, and they're just in small bodies. And so they're not given the treatment that children really need, the developmentally appropriate things that children need at that age. So could you just talk to us a little bit about what it was like being a child, separated for the most part from your parents, and being raised by this organization?
Yeah, definitely. My parents joined Scientology's most dedicated group, which is called the Sea Organization, which is a military style. Like they literally wear military uniforms and they have military ranks. And it's a military style organization where members sign 1 billion year contracts because they believe we're all immortal souls. And they work literally 15-hour days, 7 days a week for this most dedicated core group. They manage all of Scientology and they deliver Scientology's higher levels of enlightenment. And my parents joined this like just before I turned 2 years old. So I never lived in a home with my parents ever. Well, I guess before I was almost 2 years old, I did. But from that point on, it wasn't like I lived communally with other kids. And then one day a week, my parents would come back to the apartment for a few hours and I would spend time with them. But that's it. There was always that separation. There was never this like home feeling or even location. It was always like a dorm room or something like that.
And you're basically being raised by other Sea Org members who are not your family. And from what I've heard from other interviewers or interviewees, is that the children experience a lot of neglect because no one's really focusing in on any one child. It's just kind of all these kids in one room trying to not hurt themselves, but inevitably things are going to happen.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Before I was 6, there were sort of like these caretakers, sort of like a nursery type environment, but it's not like we were going home every day and getting encouraged by or played with or getting to be seen by our parents. And then by the time I was 6, there were about 80 to 100 kids at this boarding school called The Ranch, which is outside of Hemet, California. And there was probably about like 6 adults there, but the truth is that the way they had us organized, the kids took care of ourselves. Like the adults did the occasional oversight. They were mostly like issuing us orders of projects that we had to do that were manual labor or like I don't know, for the most part, making sure we didn't murder each other, I guess. But like the kids put toilet paper in the kids' room. The kids did each other's laundry. The kids served up food to other kids. I was for a period like the child medical officer. I gave vitamins to the kids. I bandaged their wounds. So we really actually took care of each other. It wasn't even the adults.
Wow. How did that go? Was everyone kind of falling into line because they were afraid of being punished or wanted to do a good job? Or was it really just as chaotic as it sounds?
Well, the truth is that it wasn't chaotic at all. We had an
Wow.
organizing chart that had 7 divisions. Each division had 3 departments. If another kid was the boss of me, I called that kid sir. Or rather bizarrely, like if my boss's name was like, if it was a girl whose name was like Melissa Smith, I would call her Mr. Smith. I don't know why we said Mr. even to girls, not even women because it's girls. So like it was extremely organized and we had an exact schedule that we followed to the letter every day. If you were late for a gathering, which was called a muster, you were punished, embarrassed, humiliated. There was like hardcore penalties. Now, I myself as a parent, I'm like, how the F did they get us to do? How did they
Yeah.
get these children to do this? I can't get my kids to do that. but but I think that if you know, my kids know different. They know that they can like that they have certain freedoms or I never knew any different. I was never treated any other way. And so we were sort of taught that if we didn't work, that we were being given room and board and we were so lucky to be at this ranch that and we were told that if we didn't give something back, if we didn't give something in exchange for all of these amazing things we were being given, we would become criminals. That's like one of the core beliefs in Scientology is that if you like you have to exchange and only criminals get things for free. And so if we didn't work, then we would be criminals.
I mean, the irony of this is it feels like you were in prison as a criminal.
Right. Yeah, that's
The
true.
way that you were put to work and no freedoms, you couldn't leave the property.
Yeah.
I've been a freelancer for almost 10 years now exclusively, which means finances aren't always entirely predictable. In the beginning, it was really hard keeping track of my budgeting, my credit cards, my spending, all of that, until I discovered Rocket Money, the sponsor for today's video. Rocket Money is an easy-to-use app that helps you save more and manage your money better. I've personally been using them for about 8 years now. I think they hooked me because you can link all of your banks in one easy place. You can see exactly where all your money is going. They can help you budget, and you can see all of your subscriptions, the ones you don't even remember signing up for. And the best part is you can actually have them help you cancel your subscriptions directly in the app with just a few easy clicks. Another favorite feature of mine is the warnings that it gives when auto payments are about to be taken out. It clocks all of your subscriptions and auto pays immediately, and it tells you in advance, hey, in 2 days this payment is about to be taken out. It really helps you be more prepared and know where your money is going and when. Another favorite feature is you can search your transactions with keywords across all of your banks all at once. So again, it's a really easy way to track when things are being taken out, if they've been taken out, and if you need to address something. Get rid of those surprises and take control of your finances. Go to rocketmoney.com/cult free to get started today for free. The link is in the description. Thanks, guys. Back to our guest. It's so interesting when we talk about these cult dynamics because most of the time, especially if you're raised in it, you don't even realize you're imprisoned until you get out of it and you recognize everything that you've been missing. I know that was a big part of your story, but before we get there, do you have any standout moments that you could share about your time in the ranch or even before
there
that
wasn't,
you remember?
like, it's almost like there wasn't a time when something specific and horrendous happened. It was just like every day kind of was. So like there would be little things like for a period because they considered us to be Sea Org members in training. So we were called cadets. And previously the Sea Org had been on an actual boat, like an actual cruise ship. And so they had like punishments like throwing people overboard if they did certain bad things. Yeah, but since we were on land, they couldn't throw us overboard. But they would do things like if you were late for a morning muster, they would like dump an ice bucket of water on your head. Now, they only had that punishment for a little bit, but I actually specifically remember that didn't happen to me. But when we woke up in the morning, they often didn't get us new uniforms because we were growing and they only got money approved for a certain number of uniforms. So we were often wearing shorts and old shirts that were like, when it was like there was ice on the ground in the morning. And so going to this morning muster, which was at 7 a.m., I just remember one of my friends getting a bucket of ice water dumped on his head because he was late. And I just remember, like, even though I was a kid and he was another kid, I just remember feeling really bad for him and that like sort of solidifying in my mind. And every morning at these musters, it was literally like Unit 1 report, all present and accounted for, sir. Unit 2 report, all present and accounted for. And then it would be like left face, and we would turn left. Someone would walk down the row and inspect our uniforms. And then while that was happening, someone was inspecting our dorms for cleanliness. And just everything was so systematized and codified. Like if you failed your birthing inspection, the first birthing chit was a warning. The second one was, I forget what it is, but I know that the fourth one was you would be assigned to pig's birthing. And I remember when my friend Lindsay got assigned to pig's birthing because she failed her birthing inspection. And it was like in this house called the Big House. And the building was completely unrenovated down to like the beams and whatever. And she had to like stay in the attic on a mattress. And I just remember her telling me that there are bats in there. And I don't know, just those are just some of the things that were normal. So even though it seems like chaos, and I think that it was chaos at other bases where kids were, at this one, it was rigid. There was a rule for everything. Everyone had a job. Everyone had a senior. And yeah, I tend to remember these little details that were like just part of everyday life.
Yeah, it was completely militarized. Was every single moment of the day scheduled for you guys?
Every single moment. Yes. There wasn't playtime. There wasn't like story time. There wasn't even like a built-in day off. Like I didn't have toys. All of our bed sheets matched. All of our uniforms matched. So even though it's not like someone came up to me one day and ripped away my individuality, it's the truth was that every single day I was wearing the same thing. Like there was no individuality whatsoever. There was no nurturing of who I am as a person because it didn't matter. I was only being nurtured to be a Sea Org member. And that's the only part of me that anyone cared about or that was important. So it's hard when it's like all these little things that add up to huge things, but it's hard to have like one big moment, you know?
Yeah, not allowed to be a child or experience imaginative play. Did you guys, I mean, children are so naturally imaginative, and obviously they're cutting that off basically from the beginning. But I wonder, did it bubble up? Did you guys try to have fun and play together, or were you just so in survival mode that you didn't have the option?
I mean, I think that different people dealt with it in different ways. Like some kids would like try to run away. I tried to run away once when I was like 7. It's like kind of ridiculous. But I mean, I think that like during my studies, I could like read a book and then I would spend a lot of the time like when I was working and doing my duties. Like I do think that I spent a good amount of time in an imaginary world where I was someone else, where it's sort of like escaping. um,
Yeah.
I think that's honestly like how I coped with it. Like I was always daydreaming as much as I could when I was working.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I actually that's why I think that like fiction and books and that sort of thing are like a huge like I almost see that as like my savior in many ways. I would have gone insane. It makes me see so much value in that art expression.
Yeah, and it's great that you had that, and it's also heartbreaking to know that the only imaginary or imaginative play that you had was a survival instinct. You weren't just having fun to have fun, it was you need to dissociate in order to handle the day-to-day life.
Right. Yes, exactly. That's true. Yeah. And I even remember when we were working, like I haven't even put this together until just now, but like sometimes if another kid had been reading a book, like while we were working, they would be telling us all the story of the book. And we'd all be working, but listening to what they were saying. And it's actually kind of really sweet when you think of it like that. Like we're taking care of each other,
Yeah.
but it's also sad.
Yeah. Did you ever try to express to your parents how unhappy or I guess it's hard to know that you're even in such a bad place when you don't know anything different, but obviously you knew that something was off and you tried to run away. So you had at least that awareness of you didn't want to be there. Did you try to express that to your parents?
Well, Scientology sort of brainwashes you from a young age to believe that if you want to leave something, it's because you're basically a good person and you believe you've done bad things to that group or in that location and you want to stop yourself from harming them. So you try to leave. So they kind of teach you that if you want to leave or if you don't like it, that it's only just because you've done bad things. So you're always checking yourself and being like, what's wrong with me? Why don't I like this? So like within the time when I saw my parents, it was just a couple hours on Sunday morning. And to be honest, it was just my dad for the most part. My mom was always away in another state or in LA or something doing a big project for Scientology. So it was mostly just my dad. And it was literally for like a couple hours on Sunday morning. And outside of that, I didn't have a way of calling him. I had no phone. There was one phone in a locked office where the adults worked. And I could write to him but all of those letters were opened. Everyone could see, all of the adults could read what I said to him. We would even like once a week we'd all be in a room where we would write this form which was called our weekly report to our parents. And it was like, this week I produced this. And you would have to say the projects you got done. You say, this week on my studies, I learned this. So it was like this form, like that was like filled out in this robotic way that you would turn into a basket at the front of the room. And there was no privacy. Like there was no direct connection with your parent. And we were taught that our parents were doing like the most valuable, important jobs in the world. And if we were to be a distraction or get in the way with that, then we would be committing like this huge crime to get in the way of Scientology. And so it was
Mm.
like our job was to train and work. And yeah, I didn't really like, I feel like once when I tried to run away, I told my dad, and and then I did kind of break down. I was like, well, it's because everybody here is so mean, which was true. The adults yelled at us all the time. You weren't allowed to ask for help in your studies. And so if you secretly even tried to ask your friend, like they would like yell at you across the entire room. They would literally be like, Jenna, shut the fuck up. Like that's how we were treated. And so I remember finally like breaking down and saying that to my dad, but the adult woman was right there watching, and my dad, he talked to me and he talked to her, and I could tell that my dad cared about me, but like I just pretty much immediately had to take it back in order to like, it's not like I had anywhere to go. There wasn't another family I could go to. I had to stay at this ranch. And so in order to survive there, I couldn't be waging war. Otherwise, my whole life would be a nightmare. So it's just set up in that way where there's nothing you can do about it.
And also, do I remember correctly that you started auditing people at 4 or before you could read, I think?
Oh, maybe you're thinking of like doing assists, like the touch assist and things like that.
Right, yes.
Yeah. So auditor training is its whole thing that like a 4-year-old would be, you have to read. You definitely have to be able to read in order to do that. But like, so Scientology has these little assists that you do that are supposed to like make your body feel better, or I don't know, help you with a cold or things like that. And so, yes, we did that in the nursery when before I even went to the ranch, we would all do these assists on each other. And then as the medical officer at the ranch, I would I would go around every day and asking kids what their sickness was. And if they didn't feel good, I would give them an assist.
So what does that actually look like?
So it would be like the kid laying on a bed, and it would be me like touching them. I would touch them and I'd be like, feel my finger. And they'd be like, yep, like meaning yes, they feel it. And then I would be like, thank you. And then you're supposed to do it symmetrically, like down the whole body. And then it would be like all the way down, like, and then I'd do like every finger, every toe. And then you'd be like, turn over, and then do the whole back of their body. And then you're supposed to do it until they say that they feel better or something like that.
Okay. So that doesn't seem like it would work. What were
It's
the results
funny.
of this? Was it all just like
It
placebo
worked.
effect?
Well, it's funny because, like, obviously it doesn't do anything. But the truth is that if someone's like, all these little things are like, how I saw them, if I got an excuse, it was, I mean, an assist, it was an excuse for me to stop working for as long as I was getting the assist,
Right.
you know? And it was like nobody could say anything bad about it because it was like a Scientology thing. So if I could like have someone give me a touch assist for 30 minutes instead of like digging a ditch or doing something else. So in that way it worked. It felt great. It was kind of annoying that
Yeah.
you had to acknowledge every time you could feel their finger, but beyond that it was like, hey,
A break.
yeah, exactly.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's how it was for many things in Scientology. Like when I did the purification program when I was 9, like we would have like I had to be in a sauna for 5 hours a day, 160 degrees, take handfuls of
What?
vitamins. But like for me, so I didn't love it, but like I got to sit down for 5 hours. So the rest of the time, like if I had been at the ranch, we had to work, and we had a certain period of the day which was from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. where we did heavy manual labor. And I'm not exaggerating in any way when I say we would get rocks from the creek, bring them to a location, they would build a rock wall. We would mix cement, we would dig trenches, we would dig holes to plant trees, we would carry wheelbarrows of gravel, we would plant cactus, we would make DG paths. Like all we were doing landscaping, but it was heavy manual labor. So it's like that wasn't fun for me from when I was 6 until I was 12. So if I had to choose between that or sitting in a 160-degree sauna for 5 hours where I could at least read a book, it's like, yeah, that sounds way better.
Yeah. So, what is the point of this purification thing, and why would you need it when you're only 9?
Well, the goal of Scientology is to move up they have this chart and you have to move up the levels. And on one side, they have all the counseling you receive. And on the other side, they have the training you do. And usually well, anyways, so there's a training and the counseling, and you have to start at the bottom and you have to do each step in order. You can't skip. And so they see the bottom of the chart as like would be somebody coming off the street. And if somebody's like taking a bunch of drugs, and like they basically believe that in order to be able to focus on your Scientology processes and have your head be in the right place, you have to get the drugs out of your system, right? So the thing is, like, I obviously hadn't taken a lot of drugs, but they consider anything like Tylenol or which I also really hadn't taken in my entire life because I was born in Scientology. But I believe like there was a period when I was really little and we first moved to LA and it was all smoggy there and I had childhood asthma and I would have to like go to the emergency room because I would have asthma attacks and they would give me something. I don't know. My mom, I don't actually know exactly what it was. So I think that was considered the drug I had had. And so they believe that everyone has to go through it. Like, yeah, I even see kids today, like they're having certificates saying, I did the purification rundown. It's like, oh my God. And so you just have to start at the bottom and move up through it. So it's just the first step.
So, they were purifying you of your asthma medication that you took years before?
Yeah, they didn't say that it was that specifically, but that's the only potential drug that I could have taken in any way.
Did they restrict your diet during that time?
No, but they do have you write down everything you eat. And they have you like, you have to drink like a quarter cup of vegetable oil. And then you have to take like a bunch of lecithin, which was like granulated. So it was, I know I'm laughing, but it's so gross. It's like you have to take all these lecithin granules and then literally a handful of vitamins and then you have to run for 30 minutes before you go in the sauna and you have to take niacin, like flushing niacin. So it's like, I believe that I got up to like 3,000 milligrams. So you're in this hot sauna and you're having a niacin reaction where you're turning red, you're itching. But honestly, between the ages of 6 years old and 12 years old, as a little girl, all of that seems way better than having to do manual labor. And
Jeez.
when we did the manual labor, they called it decks because on the ship, on the boat, it was like you'd be working on the decks. So, and the rule was you have to run on the decks. So it was like not only we were working, but we were supposed to run everywhere. And if you were walking, they'd be like, Jenna, run. So you were always told to run. So I don't know. The purification rundown, although looking back, it was terrible. It's like in contrast, it was like a vacation.
Jeez. Were you okay? I mean, physically, I feel like that's a recipe for just being malnourished or just, I don't know, emaciated, running all the time in these saunas. And physically, how was your health?
I mean, physically, I was okay. I mean, I would start in the sauna, I would start getting bloody noses every day. And eventually you just have to say that each step on the chart has its own end phenomena. And you basically have to say that in order to be done with it. And you have to like, the e-meter has to verify this. And so I would just wound up saying that so I could be done with it. At the time, and even up until this day, I have basically accustomed myself to not feel things that my body was experiencing. Basically, we're taught in Scientology that we're spiritual beings who live lifetime after lifetime. Our body is just this meat thing that we inhabit. And so I just viewed my body as like this organism that I was inhabiting for this lifetime. Next lifetime, I would pick up another one. And so it was like I disregarded the pain that I was going through. And I feel like only now, even like do I have to realize like, okay, I'm in a bad mood? I'm only now starting to realize it's like, oh, I'm in pain. That's why I'm in a
Mhm.
bad mood. I'm not just irritable. And it's just crazy how we were trained to completely ignore how our body felt at all times and completely disregard it. And so I was uncomfortable, but I was like, I guess focusing on that wasn't really an option because I had to do it.
Yeah, because you weren't even allowed to take pain medication as simple as Tylenol.
That's right. Yes. And I remember, now that you mention that, once a week, every Saturday evening after dinner, so it was from like 7 p.m. until 10:30 p.m., we would, at the ranch, we would have this whole evolution where it would be white glove cleaning. So every room on the entire ranch, we would have to clean it so well until it got inspected with a white glove, like that they wouldn't find dust or dirt or anything. And there was a whole sequence to cleaning a room that we had to follow. We were given gallons of like bleach and ammonia just as kids. We were supposed to
Oh
figure out how to
boy.
dilute this and yeah, and what not to mix. And so I remember when I would be cleaning almost every week, I would get this huge headache. I now looking back, I wonder if it's because of the chemicals, but
Yeah.
I would just be in so much pain and I would just like even would be throwing up sometimes and I would just keep cleaning. And now when I have a headache, instead of ruining my day, I'll take like an Advil, but like the whole time when I was a kid, I would just get these headaches every week and I would just like power through it.
Jeez. Yeah, it's no wonder that you had to separate your mind from the pain, almost hypnotize yourself out of feeling anything just so that you can focus. I mean, I don't know how you had any sort of mental clarity being in so much pain all the time.
Yeah, well, the truth is that it's like a survival mechanism, and now I'm having to reverse hypnotize myself to actually
Yeah.
feeling pain and to be like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to rest, and it doesn't make you a horrible person. But it's which, is part of what's sort of interesting when when you leave, people think, okay, it's all over, you're free. And the truth is
Mm-mm.
that often it takes as many years to undo what happened as it did to, you know, get you in that situation or into that position or that mindset in the first place.
Well, it's important to mention that kids' brains are wired from 0 to 7. They're constantly taking in everything around them, and that's how their brain learns how the world works. And so, if you're in a cult, a high control group, your brain is wired for that cult. And when you leave, you have to actively deprogram that. You have to actively find the awareness of where things are different, where reality meets your cult, and try to separate the two and figure out what was a lie and what wasn't, and it does take a long time, and sometimes people continue in that programming because they don't make the effort to actually stop and recognize what's going on in their brain, and the same patterns will keep repeating. It's a really difficult process, and I don't say that to discourage anybody from doing it, and I think everyone does it at their own time. Maybe it's 10 years later, maybe it's the first year you leave, but it is something that's important if you want to find more peace and happiness in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's difficult. And sometimes if you're surrounded by people who went through the same thing as you, they're almost like you're almost all together can still be propping up this way of thinking without even knowing about it for
Mhm.
for many, many years. So
Yeah. Let's talk about the first time you went to Clearwater and it opened your eyes to how other people were living versus how you were living on the ranch.
So, for much of the time before I was 12, I would see my dad on the weekends and occasionally I would see my mom, but her job was that she was in charge of certain special projects for renovating large church buildings. And so she did the renovations for the Celebrity Center in Los Angeles. She did the renovations for Scientology's cruise ship called the Free Winds. So this involves her being in LA when I was in Hemet, or her being in Curacao when I was in LA, or she went to Scientology's largest, most profitable base called Flag, and that's in Clearwater, Florida. And it's sort of a mecca for Scientology where Scientologists come from all over the world and they train there, and Scientologists pay for Scientology's highest levels there. So, they make like $2 million a week at this base, and it's like really held in high prestige. And my mom went there to do renovations on some church buildings, and then she became like the boss of the boss of the boss of that base. And so she was there for like more than 2 years, and while I was at Hemet, so I hardly saw her. So she had arranged for me to come visit her for a period of time, which was like, wow, amazing. So I arrived to Clearwater, I believe the first time was when I was 10. I basically went from a situation where I was living in a dorm with 7 other girls, attached by one bathroom to 7 other girls, and we were getting uniform inspections, close order drilling. I went into my mom's apartment there, and it was like gorgeous for one thing. I had my own room. It had these like fluffy floral sheets that were like amazing and comfortable. I had a door I could shut. I had a closet. There was like a jacuzzi tub in there. Like at the ranch, we weren't allowed to have any shampoo or conditioner that was not
What?
scented. To be honest, I usually would steal people's shampoo and conditioner because I forgot to get some from my dad. My dad was only making $50 a week. So it was hard for us all to even buy like parents were supposed to buy stuff for their kids with that money, socks, underwear. So, shoes. But, there's this jacuzzi tub, and my mom, there was a 16-year-old girl who I considered to be 100 years old because I was only 10. But looking back, she was a minor, and her job was basically to clean my mom's room, the apartment. She would wake my mom up every morning. Like instead of an alarm clock, she would be like, she called my mom Sir, like, Sir, it's time to wake up. And she would make her breakfast. She would put it out on the table. She would make her this special watermelon juice. In the morning when me and my mom would have breakfast, she had a TV. I never had a TV as a kid. We never played video games. We didn't have any of that. So there was a TV that, like at my dad's apartment, he had a TV, but we could only watch movies. And even they tried to take that away. But so my mom would watch VH1. We would watch like the video countdown. She had a car where she would drive into work every day. And it was like, I know I sound crazy, but this is all normal, but it wasn't normal for me. Like we would wake up and it would be like ice bucket on your head, Sir, good morning, like unit 1, a president accounted for. And so this was like, holy crap, this was like heaven. And then I had to do a course when I was there, but the course rooms, like a Scientology course, but the course rooms were nice, and it was like way easier than doing like deck work or manual labor. And then at lunch, I would go eat with my mom, and we could pick whatever we wanted to eat. Like if I was like, I want a hamburger, then there was like a cook that worked especially for the executives and would make food on demand. There was like this kitchenette where it had like snacks and all this stuff in there all day, cheese and crackers. And at the ranch, if we got hungry between meals, if we took anything from the kitchen, we would like literally get in trouble, and we would get assigned to do amends, and we would have to ask all the group members to let us re-enter the group if we had done enough amends. So we are not allowed to steal food. So like there was like this plethora of food and amazingness, and there was like a whiteboard I remember in the room where we would eat, and I could draw pictures on it. This was like so amazing to me. I could like walk down the street to where my mom worked, and then same thing for dinner. And then in the evening, I would go home with this young girl, 16 years old, and I would help her do my mom's laundry. And it was like the ultimate freedom. At the ranch, in the evening, we had to do study. We would study until 9 o'clock at night. And so, like, just having this freedom where I could go in the pool. And then once a week, a senior Scientology executive would come into town, and they would stay in the like condo next door. So when they were in town, like we would go into the green room because they would speak at this little Scientology event. We would go into the green room and everyone would be there hanging out. There would be snacks. People would be telling jokes. They would be drinking wine, which was like unheard of in Scientology. Like nobody drank wine. And then like we would watch movies. I could put on a show. I would do these ridiculous shows for these executives and my mom. And we would watch movies. And sometimes like on the weekend, we would go to like I just remember going to this place where the manatees were. We would go, like if my uncle Dave was in town, we would go to hockey games. Sometimes we would go up to his apartment and watch movies or go out to see a movie. And I just never had that
Yeah.
at all at the ranch. Like it seemed like heaven. And so I was like, oh my God, how do I become a Scientology executive? Like that was like
Uh-huh.
my goal. I got to get the hell out of this ranch and become a Scientology executive.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was thinking as you're telling me this. I'm just thinking, yep, that would be my thought process of how do I get out of this and become this? Because clearly now you're exposed to the hierarchy and what it means to be on top. And did you ever ask your mom, why couldn't you bring me here sooner? This is awesome.
I didn't ask because I was like, what? Do not ask questions. Accept what you have. Do not mess
Yeah.
this up at all. And so the thing is that I also wasn't doing schooling when I was there. And I wound up being there for a few months, and not doing schooling at that time actually set me back in a way that I never actually recovered from because they didn't even bother trying to recover it. But like you were saying earlier, how, as a child, your mind is still developing and you're taking things in. I think our mind is also at that point when you're a kid, it sees like your job is almost to appease your caretakers because you rely on them for survival. So you're not like asking questions or like quizzing them because you can't, without them, you have nothing. You have no way of getting food. Your mind kind of sees it in that way. So looking back on it now as an adult and a mother, I'm like, what the fuck? But sorry, can I not swear?
No, that's fine.
Okay. But like at that time, I was just like, oh, how do I get in good with these people? How do I be so good that so that I can like have this life?
Yeah. So that was the moment that you doubled down on becoming the best Scientologist you could be.
Yes. And all I wanted to do was graduate from the ranch. Like all I wanted to do was complete my curriculum and just finish it so that I could get the hell out of there.
How long did that take?
Well, it wound up happening in a roundabout way. So I wound up going back to the ranch, and then I wound up going back to Clearwater one more time, which only solidified this way of thinking. And then I went back to the ranch. We were there was like this big evolution happening in Scientology called the Golden Age of Tech, where they just were, it's too stupid to explain. It's too stupid. But us as kids were used as like a workforce to build the e-meters, which is Scientology's like lie detector device. So we were used for that. And my mom had finally come back to Hemet. So I could see her once in a while. So they made it so that our curriculum to graduate the ranch was going to be like where we had to become Scientology auditors, which as far as I was concerned was going to take 10 years because it takes a long time to become a Scientology auditor. So I was like, this was like the worst possible news for me. I did not like this at all. And so I was like, maybe if I go to Clearwater to do my training, then I can get through it there quickly. And that was sort of me thinking that if I went to Clearwater, that I would have this great life. And somehow my mom wound up going for this, even though it was the first time she was back in Hemet. So it's kind of weird. Like, it's the first time we're together and she's like, yeah, go to Clearwater. But whatever. I went there and I thought it was going to be like so awesome how it was before, and it was not. My mom wasn't there. I did not live in that nice apartment. I was like thrown into a dorm with a bunch of other girls, one bathroom. They gave me a Sea Org uniform and they're like, you're in the Sea Org now. Like, I actually remember arriving to the airport and the person who was supposed to pick me up wasn't there. And I I was terrified of non-Scientologists. They didn't show up for 2 hours. I didn't have a phone. It's like from the moment I got there, it was like not how it used to be. And so, yeah, I wound up being there until I was 16. I maybe saw my parents once or twice for uh like a half an hour, and I was not allowed to call them. I could write them, but everything would get seen. And at this point, I think that I was reaching puberty, and at a point, it just became where I was detaching myself from my parents because, and they just sort of, in some ways, became strangers because I hadn't ever lived in a home with them. I hadn't spent a ton of time with them, and it's what I had to do for survival.
Yeah, and hitting puberty and starting to like boys or flirt with boys, something that's completely natural, but absolutely condemned in Scientology, was kind of a
Mhm.
turning point for you. How old were you when you started getting in trouble for flirting and, or at least what they thought was flirting?
So what's crazy is that even when we're at the ranch from when I was 6, like if you flirted or they thought you were like being overly friendly with a boy, you would get a report written on you and you would get in trouble for it. So like from the moment that I had the capability of being a human girl interacting with a human boy, it was like that was like a crime. It was horrible. But I think that by the time I was like 13 or 14, I would get in trouble for like flirting with boys. And in Scientology, not that this was on my mind at this time, but like, or in the Sea organization, this most dedicated group, so many people get married so young because you can't have sex before you get married. But the truth is that it's not just that you can't have sex. Like you can't do anything more than just kissing. Like if you touch someone too long, if you hug too close, you will get assigned to what's called the RPF, which is the Rehabilitation Project Force, which is this program where you wear all black. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to, and you do 5 hours a day of intensive interrogation asking you all the things you did wrong and that are bad, basically getting grilled over what your crimes are. The rest of the time you do heavy manual labor, and you I believe that you get like half pay. You have to like run and do push-ups, all this stuff. And the RPF birthing is like they were bunk beds like this close to each other. It was basically like a hellhole. You're completely ostracized, and usually like people were often on this program for like 5 years. I remember one person was on it for 9 years. And
What?
so it was like crazy. Yeah. Like some kids at the ranch, their parents were on this program and they didn't see them. They weren't allowed to talk to them for years. And so, if you get out of line in any way, just like a little touchy feely, you get sent to the RPF. So people get married when they're 15, 16, 17, just to avoid having to do that program.
Mhm.
And in many cases, you like because in Scientology they believe we're all immortal spiritual beings. Our bodies may be different ages, but we're not really like, so it'd be like a 16-year-old getting married to a 30-year-old. So it was just
Oh
like
boy.
this sort of built-in thing. So I would say that, by the time I was 13, 14, I started getting like interested in boys, but it was always criminalized. It was always something I had to hide. And it was always something that I was like, never, never do anything inappropriate or that's the end of the world. In fact, my mom because she was always separated from my dad, she wound up having an affair with somebody who was in Clearwater, and had been assigned to this program while I was in Clearwater. And so it was just like I couldn't talk to her, I couldn't get a hold of her, and it was just this big nightmare. So even more so, the idea of stepping out of line in that way was terrifying.
Something that I forgot to bring up, when did your Uncle David become the head? What age were you when that happened?
Okay, so L. Ron Hubbard died in 1986. So I would have been 2 years old. And I had no idea that my uncle was in charge of Scientology or when he became in charge of Scientology when it happened. I was completely clueless. I remember one time when I was at the ranch and another kid who was my friend, I remember him telling me my uncle was the leader of Scientology. And I was like, I remember him saying, he's like, your uncle Dave is like the boss of this whole thing. he said he's the chairman of the board. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And he was like, he's like the boss of everyone. He's the boss of the whole thing. And I was like, really? I was like, how do you know? I had no clue.
Wow,
Now,
that's crazy. I would have thought that I don't know if special treatment would have necessarily happened in Scientology because that doesn't seem like it's really a thing unless you're in the ranks, well, because you were a child. But I feel like at the very least, all eyes would be on you to kind of do things right, but you just didn't even have the awareness.
yes, I definitely feel like the things you're talking about that you would think would happen did happen in some ways later. It's just prior to that, I was completely clueless. And I remember seeing him talk on stage. Like, Scientology has about 6 international events per year where the senior executives come on stage and they talk to all Scientologists. Everyone gets dressed up and it's thousands of people in like the Shrine Auditorium. And I remember my uncle would speak at those, and even sometimes my dad would. But I kind of just thought like maybe I didn't really think it through. I was dumb. I was just like, maybe everyone's uncle does. Because some of the
Yeah.
people who were at the ranch with me, their parent would be up there too. Because I guess I was at the base where international executives were. So that's sort of all I thought of. So I didn't
Mm.
really know until later. And, and later on, it wound up, in some cases, me getting treated better or what Scientology considered better. And in many cases, like just being completely scrutinized and harassed more than others.
Yeah, because there was a part in your book where you talk about getting in trouble for flirting or being overly flirtatious, and your uncle gets involved, and you're like, "Oh man, I thought my punishment was gonna be worse than this because he got involved."
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so when I was about 14 or 15, there was a boy who was on course with me, and I feel like we were flirting, and like he was the first person who made me sort of question my Scientology beliefs. Like, he was a cadet, so he wasn't yet a Sea Org member. And so I really wasn't allowed to be flirting with him at all. So even like I feel like even if I didn't kiss him or something like that, like I was still could possibly go to the RPF for even entertaining this in any way. And but he was the first person who was like, "Do you really believe that you're he said a thetan, that's what we call a spiritual being." And he was like, you don't like I wound up telling him that my mom was on the RPF, which I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. I was supposed to hide it. And he was like, "So you never see your parents ever? You're just here. You've been here for years and you never see them." He was the first person that like kind of showed me any empathy, and he made me, and I was also coming of an age where I would start to question things just developmentally. Yeah, that was the first time that I ever really experienced doubts in that way, but then I got in huge trouble for it as a result of me having these interactions with this boy every day, and I was worried that we would, like, kiss or something like that. So I wound up, and I did not wanna go to the RPF, so I wound up writing a petition to my Aunt Shelley, who was my uncle's assistant and, like, right-hand woman. I wound up writing a petition to her for me to go back to the cadet org or go back to the ranch in California. And basically, one day at a gathering, a senior executive, he basically announced to everyone at the gathering that I had written this petition and that it was disgusting and embarrassing, and he couldn't believe that I did that. And you weren't supposed to get in trouble for writing a petition in Scientology. And he basically said that I had to go out to the birthing and do heavy manual labor. And I refused to do that. And I tried to call my parents because I was like, "Hey, I'm done with heavy manual labor." I did that since I was 6 years old. Like, I was like, "No, I'm not doing that anymore. I don't need it." And I didn't do anything. Well, I did do some things wrong, but writing the petition wasn't wrong.
Mhm.
And I tried to call my parents, and I wound up getting held down by 3 adult women. Actually, one of them was a minor, and 2 of them were adults, and then 1 security guard man. They literally were physically holding me down from calling my parents. And because I had halfway called my parents, like I reached the reception maybe had gotten them, and so my parents wound up calling back, and this senior executive who was also supposed to be my guardian at the time, he did let me talk to them because they demanded that I talk to them. But it was just like sort of the beginning of the end for me. Like, it was the first time that I really started realizing that I could not take all of this anymore. Like, and I started getting in trouble. I started getting assigned to reform programs. As a result of all that happening, my Aunt Shelly Miscavige wound up yelling at me and assigning me to a program where I would be watched day and night. Like, I couldn't even go into the bathroom by myself without having this one gal
What?
be with me. I was forbidden to talk to my friends, and my job outside of studying 5 hours a day and studying about how crimes make you evil in Scientology and you have to confess and be a better person. That's what I would study. I would also get interrogations from this high level woman on the e-meter in a room where I wasn't allowed to leave. I was asked, prodded, while being videotaped endlessly about anything bad I had done, even asked like sexual questions, like, what I had done with this boy, or like interpersonal, like had like in Scientology, like if you touch yourself, they consider that to be a horrible crime that you have to confess to, but they ask you about it. Like, so even if you don't, you get asked and harassed about it. Like, to be honest, like, I know that's a normal part of life, but I did not do it because for this reason, because the
Mhm.
absolute terror of being asked about it and being required to give details that I saw other people going through, which is actually interesting because you shut off this part of yourself completely
Yeah.
for fear of having to have your privacy invaded while being recorded, while being alone in a room that you're not allowed to leave with an adult woman. Only now that I'm 41 do I realize that them doing this, them requiring you to give details and asking you these questions and not taking no for an answer, is actually a form of child P.
Yeah.
And but it takes me that long to realize it because it was just so normal for me. And
Mhm.
then the rest of the time I would be doing cleaning and doing the laundry of executives. And it was even where like we would do cleaning and we would do their laundry, and we would have to put a vote slip on their bed at the end of every day to say like, can you please rank our work from 1 to 7? So it's literally insane. Like, I was a minor child. All the other people doing this were minors as well. And we're working as little slaves for these executives, cleaning their rooms, doing their laundry. We had to get a pass on how well we could iron their shirts. Like, that was part of completing this program. It's just
How long
insane
were you
looking
in
back at
that?
it. That one was like, 6 months. And
Okay.
once again, I will say that ironing and cleaning is easier than hauling rocks, digging trenches, and digging holes for trees. So even though it's like crazy that we were doing that, not going to school, that it was still better than what I had to do when I was 6 till I was 12. And that is how I looked at it. Like, I looked at it like,
Yeah.
oh, this is easy. And even while I was on this program, I mean, there was like another 9-year-old boy who was on this program with me. And it was just completely normal to me. And he would do things that were like normal for a 9-year-old boy. Like, he would hide all the dishes in the room in the oven, and then I would get in trouble. Or he would like, and I was like, what is this lunatic doing? Because I had been trained from a young age to like not act like a child. And
Yeah.
so I thought this 9-year-old boy was like a lunatic that I was somehow responsible for, but really he was normal and I wasn't.
The way you're just laughing about it, you're like, I was the lunatic.
Exactly. But I was like, is he crazy? Why is he acting like a baby? But he was literally just 9 years old.
Yeah.
And some things, like, you just can't get the perspective on that until I have had a 9-year-old, 2 9-year-old kids. And I'm like, oh my God, what was I thinking? Like, what was happening?
Yeah, let's talk about how you eventually got married and what that was like being married in the Sea Org.
Okay.
Or were you still technically in the Sea Org by that time?
Yeah, yeah. When I was 16 years old, I was like sort of plucked out of my everyday duties, made to do another interrogation program, except this time I would basically, when I wasn't getting interrogated, I would have to scrub the bathroom the entire time with someone watching me the entire time, someone sitting outside my room at night, making sure I didn't try to escape. As horrible as that is, it is also interesting that the person who was watching me was a minor. And the way that I would get through it was because they would sit there and tell me the stories of Harry Potter. And like it's sad, it's like sad and horrible, but it's also sweet that that person was willing to do that for me. But then also they got in trouble for it. And so then someone else who wouldn't do that was put in charge of watching me clean the bathroom. And I would even occasionally have to eat meals in the bathroom because my uncle would be passing through the hall, and for him to have to see me, this unethical person, was too much for him to bear. And so I would just have to eat in the bathroom. Anyway, so I was brought then to LA, told that my parents had left Scientology, were in Mexico, and that's why I had been doing this program. Like, I didn't even know why I was in trouble at that point. And then they were like, oh, yeah, and you're supposed to go with them. So at this point, I haven't seen my parents for years. I've completely rearranged my mind and my life to only caring about my friends, and that being my family. And I was told that I was supposed to go to Mexico, where I did not speak Spanish. I was told that I was going to go to a regular school where I had only been going to school one day a week this entire time. So at this point, I was 16. I'd only been going to school one day a week. There was no grades. There was no diplomas. I was so far behind. And then we were taught that in regular schools, they're like terrible and evil. And Scientology believes that psychiatrists and psychologists are like the devil, and that they like do lobotomies on people constantly, and they give them drugs, and that like they even have all these displays that they show you that they killed this celebrity, they killed this celebrity. And so like the idea of going to a regular school to me was like, I don't want to get stabbed in the eye with an ice pick and get killed. Nothing about this arrangement was exciting for me. And so I was basically like, no, I want to stay. I was hoping that I would get sent back to Clearwater. I assumed that's what would happen, where my friends were, where the boy I liked was. And they were basically like, okay, you can stay, but you're going to stay here in LA. I was super bummed out about that. Yeah. So it wound up being where I was in LA, and after doing a program there, where I lived in a room by myself. I sat in a room the entire rest of the day studying all about suppressive persons, which in Scientology are basically people that have gone bad and have become critics of Scientology, studying about how horrible they were, basically in reference to my parents, getting quizzed on everything having to do with those study materials. And basically I would have to like ask for someone to walk me to the bathroom. I was just alone all day, except for when I was driving to my room, and at a meal when I would sit at a table with just this one woman. And this went on for months. But when I finally finished that program, I was not even allowed to answer any phone on the base in case it was my parents calling me to get a hold of me. And all of my letters from my friends were intercepted. I never saw them. And so finally I was put on a regular job, allowed to live in a regular dorm. And like I met my ex-husband there at the time. I was 16 and he was a couple years older than me, but I would see him, and then we'd be on course and we'd be kind of flirting. And then we started dating. And then in Scientology, everyone gets married in like 5 minutes. Well, in the Sea Org, they get married like immediately. And we decide, like, I really liked him because he was cute, he was normal, he was cool. And also he had not grown up in the same way that I had. He was a Scientologist, but he wasn't part of the most dedicated group. So he would tell me about like excursions he went on with his family members and parts of the world that he traveled to, and things like that, and stories about regular school. And it all felt kind of like a fiction book to me. Like it was like, wow, he's like knows stuff. He's like worldly. And I just like, I feel like I loved having that attachment to the outside world. And as somebody who had been cut off from my family, my brothers, had lost all of my friends that I had in Clearwater now, I think more than I realized at the time, the idea of having a family of my own, just one person who was on my side, who was like my husband, was like, that's what I needed in my life. That's what I wanted. And so we got engaged. And then when we said we wanted to get married, they basically researched everything into his family, and they found out that one of his uncles had like confessed to going on an anti-Scientology site. And they basically proceeded in this year-long trying to put him through this program and said we couldn't get married. The truth is that they were really worried that my parents would somehow try to come to the wedding because I was a minor, insist on it, and that he would meet this uncle and they would conspire together to bring down Scientology. That's how paranoid they are. I mean, that's why they sent my parents to Mexico. It was to have them out of the reach of any journalists. I was never allowed to tell anybody that they had left Scientology. I'd constantly had to be hiding it. The senior official on the base who was dealing with me, she would make me practice with her on how to lie to my ex-husband about where my parents were. Cause he was always like, where's your parents? How can I ask your dad to marry you? And I was like, are you the police? Like, I was like, just like, why? It was such an uncomfortable, weird situation. And so it was like this year-long program. It just pissed me off. Everything about it was wrong. They kept having these updates. They were just made up. Anyone else would have been allowed to get married in 1 minute. And it was because it was me. And I was just so sick of this stuff happening all the time that we wound up sleeping together before we got married.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. When they found out, when he confessed,
Oh,
I
no,
was to
he
the point.
confessed. No.
Yeah, he confessed. He wasn't as like schooled in confession. I had been getting confessionals for years and years. And I was to a point where I was like, yeah, I don't feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Not even a little. Like I was like, nope. And he felt bad about it when I was like, well, why'd you do it then? Why'd you do that? If you weren't gonna, like, didn't you know this was gonna happen? But it's understandable. They took him away. They hid him away in another building in the basement while he was getting interrogation. They would not tell me where he was. They said that I was going to do heavy labor. I was like, you're going to have to make me. I was like, I got to this point where I was like, I'm not doing a single thing you guys say. I can't even make myself if I wanted to. I was like furious. I was completely non-compliant. And I just could not stand another second about being interrogated about my sex life
Yeah.
with an older woman while being videotaped, while not being allowed to leave the room. So when they would try to do this, I would be like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm leaving. And they would physically restrain me from leaving the room. It would wind up in fights, in like me running down the back stairwell, being chased by security guards. They would try to chase me down the street. And only when I started screaming, leave me alone, would they act like I was like, they would be like, no, this happened so many times. I just couldn't anymore. And then I started on a mission to find where they had hidden my fiance. And they wouldn't tell me. And I would like walk between the different Scientology buildings. I would like literally bust down doors. And I would like find clues. The person who was handling me, I would bust into her office and find the papers and be like, oh, he's at this place being counseled by this person. I would go there and they just wouldn't let me find him, wouldn't tell me where he was. I was so sick of everything. I was sick of being disconnected from my friends, my family, having nothing, being treated like garbage and having to put up with it. I mean, the office that I had been in at that point, I actually think I was 18 at this point. Like I turned 18. But since I was 16, the office I had been in had a camera on me all day. I was just so sick of it. And I basically was like, hung myself out of the 5th floor building window. And I was like, if you don't bring me to my fiance or bring him here, then I will let go. I did believe I was a spiritual being. I did believe that if I died, that I would just come back as a baby and maybe not be put through this hell anymore. But also, I also knew that because I was Jenna Miscavige and they only care about PR, they only care about how they look. They don't actually care about anybody. I was like, if I do this, it's all I have. I have nothing. I have nothing else. And so it worked. They brought him to me. And then we wound up getting through this. It's a whole other story, a whole other program. But anyways, they wound up after another year finally letting us get married. And yeah, so it's kind of a nightmare.
Oh
But
my
we did wind up
gosh.
getting married. Yeah.
And you ended up leaving Scientology together, right?
Yes, that's right. So when I was finally ready to leave Scientology, my husband at the time wanted to leave with me, but they basically got a hold of him and were secretly meeting with him and telling him bad things about me, about my family. And they were telling him that
Jeez.
and that if he left with me, he would never be allowed to see his family again. Now, his family mattered to him more than it did for me because he had lived in a home with his mom and dad and his brother and his sister his entire life. I had never had that. So this and he and I had maybe by this point been married for like 3 years, and it had really been a bit of a roller coaster. And so for him it was like that was his values. That's what, what was important to him. And so they were just bad mouthing me to him, interrogating him. And then he was lying to me saying like, "Oh no, I'm just not coming home. I'm not talking to them." Until finally it came to a head where I was like, "All right, I was in touch with my parents at this time secretly, and I had gotten a cell phone which they had tried to take away, and I had threatened to call the police if they did. And basically I was like, "All right, I'm going to leave. I have no choice. Like I can't go through this." And then they wouldn't even let him take me to the airport. They tried to stop him. They're like, "No, you put her in a cab and you get rid of her." And he was like, "No, I'm not doing that. This is my wife. Like we don't need to say goodbye like that." So he took me to the airport, but the girl from Scientology insisted. She was like right between us, and we were crying and saying, "I love you." And she was literally just like, "Hurry up, get to the airport." She was a nightmare. And then at the airport, we were hugging and saying, "I love you." And he was saying like, "I wish you would just finish your Scientology program and then you could leave without making it so we would never talk to each other again." And then I was like, "Fine, I'll do it." I didn't want to, but I was like, I don't know what's going to happen to him if I leave. And I was like, just the idea of losing yet another person was just horrible to me. So I was like, fine, I'll do it. And then he broke down and told me that he had been meeting with these senior executives, all the stuff that they'd been telling him, that it was all in secret. He wasn't allowed to tell. And then the gal from Scientology who was there was flipping out. Like she was like, get her out of here, get her out of here at this point. And then I was like, so then I said, "Oh no, I'm going to stay. We're going to finish our program together." And then we tried to go back there and they tried to separate us again. And he was like, "No, we're not going to be separated again." They're like, "Well, you have to leave if you're not going to be separated." And then we're like, "Okay, well then I guess we have to leave." So we wound up leaving together that night. It could have gone very differently. When I look back at it and everything that happened, like this man is the father of my kids. If they had succeeded, I wouldn't even have my kids right now. So it's just like so insane to me that was so freaking close to happening and changing my life completely. And honestly, how evil they are and how little regard they have for love, family, marriage, children. They wouldn't let us go back and get our stuff. We didn't really have any money. We wound up staying in a hotel that night. Like it was like the Travelodge. And they showed up the next morning at the Travelodge with a U-Haul with all of our stuff that they had gone through, pages of inventory. And they basically said, "Here's your stuff," which is their way of taking away the things that you own, photos, policy documents that they believe are incriminating to them. And they said, "All right, here's all your stuff." And the security guard looked straight at Dallas, my ex-husband, and he was like, "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you never speak to your parents again."
Oh,
And they had expected us to go to Virginia, where my parents had now lived, but we went down to San Diego instead. We never went back after that.
so did he reconnect with his parents?
So we did reconnect with his parents. So this is like a great point where it's like we left, we were gone, we were out of the Sea Org, but from the moment we were at his parents' house, which was 2 hours later, they were active Scientologists. Scientology called them immediately, was telling them what to do, and was in their ear and pressuring them to either get us back to Scientology or to disconnect from us. So it wound up being a bit of a hellhole after being born and raised in a cult and managing to leave, which is a miracle in its own. I'm sure that you talk to so many people how it's a little literal miracle if you're able to leave right back into this fire of older Scientologists who are trying to pressure me to do more Scientology, be good with Scientology. And it was just like a nightmare.
Do you think a huge part of why they didn't want you to leave was because of your uncle? Because of the PR?
For sure. Yeah. Yes. Because of the PR. And yes. I mean, at the time when I was in Scientology, if you had somebody in your family who wasn't in good standing, you would get kicked out. I think that they were worried that me connecting back up with my parents would make my parents because I think that they kept me there to keep my parents under control, to not speak out about Scientology, to not threaten legal action. I think they had me there to use as their tool, and that was their benefit. And so I think that by us leaving and going to my parents, they were afraid of what my parents would do or say. What they should have been afraid of was me. My parents have never spoken out about Scientology, but I have. And it's literally all the things that they do to prevent all these things. They just ruin people's lives willy-nilly, and they create enemies because of their paranoia when they don't need to. If they had left us alone after we left Scientology, if they hadn't tried to do all this stuff and make so many problems, I probably never would have spoken out about Scientology, but they just can't help themselves.
What are some of the things that they did after you left?
We were living with his parents, and we were also working with them. They had a jewelry store, so they gave us a job there, which was nice. I mean, we were making like $9 an hour, but it was still better than $50 a week in Scientology. But if you're a Scientologist and you own a business, you're part of their WISE group. WISE is a front group. World Institute of Scientology Enterprises is a front group for Scientology. They have business owners pay them dues. They do mediations for them. They make sure you're doing certain trainings on your staff. The business is run on a Scientology org chart. And so they were like putting pressure on the business line, saying you can't hire people who are ex-Sea Org members. There were staff there who were actual Scientologists who were trying to audit me constantly, trying to fix me to go back into Scientology. They were talking to Dallas's parents. They wanted us to go back to Scientology to get this justice procedure called the Committee of Evidence. They basically wanted to put us on a program to get us back in good standing in order to safe point us, but they can't help themselves. They can never say, I'm sorry, or they can never say, look, we want to calm down and work this out. They always want to be in control and be the boss. They don't give an inch. So they were trying to do this to keep us as Scientologists in good standing, because that would look bad on them if I, as Jenna Miscavige, was in bad standing. But they couldn't just be nice about it. So it was just all pressure. One day when we were at work, we got a call. Someone was like, I'm a good Samaritan. I want you to know that you and your wife have been being followed for the last several months. And I have a police scanner, and there's 2 people. And he was like, well, how do you know? He's like, your wife went to this hair salon, you ate here, you live here, and so on. And it was like, Jesus Christ, like it was just crazy. And every night when we went home, we would be fighting with his dad, who, by the way, documents have come out about all this since then. About a year ago, high-level Scientology defector, he had these documents since he left, but they came out. And there's all this documentation of them trying to get in touch with his parents and trying to safe point them, get information about us, all this stuff. And so it's literally in writing, him sending this information to my uncle, everything that went down before we left, when they were trying to get Dallas to stay, Dallas, my ex-husband. So it's all in writing. It's all literally right there, all the things they were saying and doing. And this just went on for years. We wound up getting the Committee of Evidence. I did it because what Dallas's family could do is they could put pressure on him to be in good standing with Scientology, and he was my husband, and they couldn't get to me. I was unconvincible, but they could get to him, and that was my relationship, and that's what people did. When they couldn't get to me anymore, they would go through him. And he at the time still believed in Scientology, and in order to get in good standing, they want you to pay what's called your freeloader debt. Basically, all Scientology services, counseling, interrogations, and training has a price. If you're not a staff member, you have to pay thousands of dollars for these things. But if you are a staff member, you get them for free. You're required to get them, but you get them for free. When you leave staff, you have to pay for all of them. They give you what's called a freeloader debt. They pretend like you were freeloading off of them in order to get free counseling and training. And then they charge you for it in order to be back in good standing. He wanted to pay this debt. And I was like, don't you dare give a single cent of our money to, I was like beside myself. We laugh about it now.
Do you remember how much it was?
Well, he was asking for the information so that we could pay it. So in these documents, it starts out saying it's going to be about 56 grand for Jenna and 26 grand for Dallas. Like, I can show you this document, but then I think that in the interest of not having me go ballistic, they whittled it down to a smaller amount, like a much smaller amount, which is just which can be seen as good, but it's also just an example of how it is in their best interest to have me be in good standing. So maybe they would make it so I would only have to pay 5 grand because they just make up these numbers anyways.
Yeah.
But somebody else who is less important to them and who has less pull, they would be like, you have to pay 40 grand. That's just evil. They don't value people.
Yeah.
It's just disgusting to me that other people have literally had to pay $40,000, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but because it's me, they would whittle it down to the smaller amount. It's just another example of how gross they are, and they will do what they can get away with. Anyways, so he was still wanting to pay this, and I was like going insane, and then tensions with me and his family were like so high because they'd be like, we want to talk to Dallas privately, and I was like, not this again. And I wound up getting a job somewhere else. We wound up moving out, and then he wound up reading a book, and we wound up watching the South Park episode about Scientology together that finally, like, he became unbrainwashed. Like, it was like a miracle.
I love that it's South Park. I remember watching the Mormon South Park episode, and I was so Mormon still. I was like, this is dumb. It's so made up. Like, they have to come up with the craziest things just to, I didn't realize it was all true, but that's so funny that was part of the deconstruction.
I know. It's so random. But yeah, because in Scientology, so like I said before, in Scientology, you have these levels that you have to go through and you can't skip. And there's this one high level called the Wall of Fire. And you're told, like, if you find out what's on this, you will like die, or your mind will get like scrambled, or something bad will happen if you find out this information before you've done all the previous steps. And so, like, I was always terrified, and I knew that there was information in this South Park episode. And so, like, I had my ex-husband watch it first, and I was still like had residual fear. And since he didn't die, I was like, okay, I'll watch it now.
That's so funny. You're like, I volunteer you as tribute. Go
he
ahead.
deserved it at this point, trying to make us pay our freeloader debt.
Oh no, that's so funny. Yeah, I remember walking into a Scientology building in Los Angeles when I lived there. I was going in with my sister, and a guy comes up all like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. He's like, do you want to know more about Scientology? And he's like, what do you know about it? And I was like, well, the only thing we really know is about Xenu. And he just went white. He's like, what do you mean? How do you know that? Just like freaking out. And now I know it's because I don't think he was even supposed to know about Xenu, or if he did, he was just like, oh no, I'm gonna die if they keep talking to me.
That is hilarious. That is so funny. Yeah, because when I was in, like, I would see people with signs that would say Xenu or aliens. I was like, those people are crazy. I was like, I hope they're okay. But little did I know.
It's so funny how similar Mormonism and Scientology are. And I know I've pissed off a lot of people, especially going on Aaron's channel and telling my story. I think he lost like hundreds of followers that day.
Mm.
because because it's so easy to point at Scientology and be like, "That's a cult," but when you really look at it, it's just so similar to all of the others. Like, just like with Mormonism, how I just mentioned, all the things in South Park I thought were so laughably untrue. Like, they just went so ridiculous to try and defame Mormonism, when in reality, that is the truth, but you're not told those things when you're in it. You have to work up
Mhm.
the ladder, just like Scientology. You have to do all those things to get to the temple, to know the higher truths. It's so funny how similar they are.
It's so true. I learned a lot of that when I was on, like, growing up in polygamy briefly, like, we compared some things, but it's so
Yeah,
interesting because they know, like, that you have to be invested enough, you have to it's invested enough in order to be able to
yeah.
believe these things, like, you have to be like, "Okay, well, there's no going back now, so I guess I'll accept it," and they know that you have to be at those levels, and it's just crazy.
Yep, it's the sunk cost fallacy. Once you get to that point,
Exactly.
the point that they tell you as children you have to make it to, once you're finally there, even if it's weird, you can't be like, "Yeah, never mind, I'm out," because you've invested so much time and money and
Mhm.
just your entire life into getting to this point. So of course you're not gonna turn around. Most people don't. Some people do, which praise to them because it's really hard to do. But most people are
Yeah.
like, "Well, I guess this is what I've been working for, so I guess I'll just go along with it."
Totally, exactly, and getting to those levels takes many years, and if you're so involved in something, it becomes where it's all your friends, your family, you've probably gotten them into it, so you risk losing all those things too if you turn against it. So it's
Yep.
like, it's not just money, it's not just time, it's like everybody you love potentially. It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's really wild. This has been so awesome. We're already at 1:30. I wanna talk, though, about relationships after leaving Scientology and what that's been like for you. Are you interested in doing a live with us?
Yeah, I think we can do that. I think that would be fun.
Awesome.
I actually think it's a hugely interesting subject. It's hugely important. I mean, the truth is that the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. And so, when you leave, having had this relationship with your family in that way and all of that, it's like it really sets you up for a doozy for the rest of your life, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah,
So,
totally. So, yeah, that would be awesome because I do think it's important, like you mentioned, the aftermath, if you will, is really important to talk about because, like you were saying earlier, a lot of people think, well, once you're out, you're just free and you can just make your decisions. But there's so much unwinding to do to really
mhm,
find that baseline. And baseline is different for everybody. So just figuring out where you land and who you want to be, how you want to present to the world,
mhm.
it's a little messy. So I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to that conversation. So before we go, though, where can everybody find you, find your book, list your channels and your handles and all of that?
Okay, so you can find my book on Amazon. It's called Beyond Belief: My Secret Life Inside Scientology and My Harrowing Escape. And my YouTube channel is just Jenna Miscavige. My TikTok is Jenna Miscavige. My Instagram is the real Jenna Miscavige because somebody else took Jenna Miscavige.
Oh, jeez.
And um yeah, so that's where you can find me. And on my TikTok, I usually just briefly talk about Scientology, but on my YouTube channel, I try to get more into healing and, what happens after, because there's so many it's not just ex-Scientologists who can relate to it. It's people
Mhm.
who grew up in other high control groups, other cults, and even just people who had like a difficult childhood and or difficult relationship. It's all this like shared humanity where I learn so much from other people, and I hopefully they go through my experience with me where I learn new things every day.
Yeah. Yeah, amazing. So let's do your Linda Listen moment.
I feel like this would be to the people, the celebrity Scientologists, and the people who are not staff in Scientology, who are usually rich people who are able to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars into Scientology. And it would be like, Linda, listen, I know that Scientology may seem like a fun, exclusive group for you, but the truth is that you are literally paying for and promoting child slave labor and sex abuse. And so as much as you would like to say that this is just people attacking your religion, you're literally paying for these things to happen to children. And you know it. And I know you know it because you see those little kids running around getting your food for you, carrying your auditing files. Those children are not immortal spiritual beings. They're actual children. And I hope you think of that next time you see a child in your little country club that you call your religion.
Absolutely. Children pay the price. And I'm glad you brought up the hierarchy of even the members, not even just the people who are running it. It's true because even Leah Remini talks about how she was just completely unaware because she was a celebrity in Scientology and the treatment is vastly different. And so I think calling attention to have them open their eyes and recognize what's right in front of them and see where the cost really is, and that is with the kids.
That's right. And there is a willful ignorance. So it's like,
Yeah.
they do have access to the internet where I never had that. They do get asked questions by some people. So it's literally like it's uncomfortable for them to have to look, but it's time for them to actually look. Like that's not an excuse anymore.
Do you think, last question, do you think if the big time celebrities, the ones who are pouring hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars into Scientology, if they just walked away, do you think Scientology would fall flat?
I think it wouldn't just be the celebrities, but I think that it would have to be like, because some people are really just really, really rich people that aren't celebrities. And so, yeah, I think if they all stopped donating to Scientology, then yes, I truly do think that Scientology would just fall flat. I mean, those donations are all they have, with the addition of a huge labor force that is like unpaid. So they don't have to pay for labor. So, but I do think that without those donations, they wouldn't even be able to sustain that labor force. So absolutely,
Yeah.
I believe that.
If only that could happen.
Exactly.
Well, this has been so awesome. Thank you, Jenna, for coming on and sharing. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, this was great. I'm glad we finally did it.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. And guys, if you're watching and if you have not been over to Jenna's channel, make sure to do that. All of the links that she mentioned will be in the description. Make sure to leave those words of encouragement down below. Real people telling their stories. It means so much to us. Best way to support the show, boosting the algorithm. Also, I should have said this at the beginning of the show, but if you interact with the post, even if you choose not to watch a video that may not suit you for any reason, if you just click on it and let it play on mute, that is another great way to show the algorithm that our core audience, our subscribers, are into our videos, and it'll promote it more to people who have never seen the channel. So that is a great way to support too. If you want to support further, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/cults2consciousness. We have some merch at cults2consciousness.com and a clips channel if you're interested in shorter excerpts of our videos. All of that's in the description. If you like this video, I will link 2 more down here below. We have an incredible playlist of former Scientologists that you are not going to want to miss. And also watch out for the live with Jenna. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.